for this afternoon. We moved public comment today for items that are not on the agenda to the morning session. And so that was where the opportunity was for folks that wanted to comment on any item that's not on our agenda. My apologies if there's anyone that has come here for that purpose at this time. If anyone has written comments that they would like to provide to us, they can go around to our offices next door and drop those off, and the clerk will circulate them to us. Otherwise, there will be an opportunity, of course, at our next meeting next Tuesday. This afternoon, as noted, we have two items. First, a final action, hopefully, on our medical marijuana land use ordinance and the mitigated neg deck that accompanies that. And then we have a very unique joint meeting of our Board of Supervisors with the entire Eureka City Council. And and because of the nature of that and the folks that will be here for that and wanting to accommodate the Eureka City Council, it's my intent to start that meeting promptly at 2 o'clock, that item. So my goal here, my plan would be to get us through this item in 20 minutes. If we don't conclude the land use ordinance discussion in 20 minutes, then we will continue that until we're done with the joint meeting. So just to let you know on that one. And so with no further ado, we will invite our planning and building staff to the table for the continued discussion of the medical marijuana land use ordinance. And I'll introduce our interim planning director, Rob Wall, and allow you to introduce your staff.
Thank you, Chair Lovelace. Yeah, Robert Wall, interim director. I have Natalie Duke, county counsel, Steve Lazar, senior planner, and I believe Steve Warner is on his way. We're happy to be at this point in the development of this ordinance. As you know, we had 10 planning commission meetings, probably 4 or 5 meetings before you. Before you today, we have the mitigated neg deck, we have the ordinance, we have some minor edits that were permitted through the adoption process. And I just wanted to thank staff for all their hard work getting here. I want to tell you and the public that this is an ordinance that we can amend. And again, I am working with the CAO's office to procure funds for an EAR for another phase of this project. There was one item that caused some of the supervisors some concern, and I think we've worked this out. Mr. Lazar has it on the board here regarding no expansion of existing cultivation areas shall be permitted, and it has the enumerated zoning districts. I am ready to make a director policy in writing that states that the ordinance is not silent to that. It does allow expansion within compliance and within the parameters set forth in the ordinance. We can clean that language up on round 2, but there will be expansion permitted in cultivation areas in the AE areas in AG or the ag properties under this ordinance. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we have that covered. Any questions?
Supervisor Sundberg.
Thank you, Chair Lovelace. So we would, because the tables that are on here, it pretty much spells out what you can and can't do and what new is and what's allowed for new cultivations. There you are. And so would it be better just to take that sentence out of there and just defer to the tables? Or what language are you proposing? I didn't hear a language. Are you saying that was going to come later? Or?
Through the chair, I'm proposing as soon as this ordinance is adopted, I'm going to have a written document signed by myself. I have that ability to make director interpretations of code, and I can clearly state that the allowance for expansion is permitted within this ordinance. It'll just clarify what we have on the books now. There is some confusion. It could have been written a little bit clearer, but you know, given our pace, I think we've done a pretty good job. But I'm willing to clarify that.
So if the goal is to the sentence is pretty clear. No expansion of the existing cultivation areas shall be permitted. So can we remove that sentence and then you can write your description of it and everything will be fine?
Director Wall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I might want to defer to council on that. I don't think that is possible.
The Deputy Counsel Duke has her hand up.
Thank you. If I could just clarify, today, if the board wishes to adopt the ordinance, we're limited to fixing typographical changes in the ordinance. I think what Director Wall was referencing is the interface between the existing cultivation in 55.4.8.2.2 and the approvals for new outdoor cultivation, new cultivation in 55.4.8.2.1. The section about no new expansion of existing cultivation is not meant to limit cultivation opportunities in the zones with less than 15% slope and that meet the criteria in 4.8.2.1.
Supervisor Bone?
So in those areas where you've got to do a CUP, that's where you'll address that, and it'll be clarified basically across the counter, or where is that what I'm talking, is that what I'm hearing? Without seeing it and putting my full trust in how you guys will write it?
Director Wall?
Through the chair, yes. The ability to apply for that use permit is permitted even under this language. And what I'm proposing to do is make it even stronger with, a department policy that recognizes that we're going to be interpreting this way.
So if I may just, what I hear you saying is that for us to adopt this today, we have to go with the existing language. You're saying that you believe that the director has enough authority to be able to make something that's a clarification of how that policy is to be interpreted. That's not a substantive change to the policy itself, correct?
Absolutely.
So that can come as a subsequent follow-up measure. Doesn't mean we're deferring this to phase 2 or anything like that. It's just a clarification.
Yeah, right. That's correct. The language exists already in the ordinance to permit this.
Okay. Supervisor Fennell?
Yes, and following up on this statement you made that this is something that will be subject to change as we move forward, I think that's very important for people to understand, because we've even gotten questions over the weekend from agricultural producers who were concerned about applying prime soils to one of these descriptions, and given that the main goal was to get it on even slopes, or so there wasn't an impact on the environment. So that's something that we will probably be hammering out as we go forward, as we look at the reality on the ground, as we look at what actually we're trying to achieve, because I've heard scenarios given to me where people may want to move within the same piece of property to a more suitable piece that fits this criteria, and how is that interpreted, and what level of regulation do they have to go through in order to actually do and make an improvement. So those are things I think we'll know better as people begin to come in for permitting, as we begin to become more familiar with what are the issues we'll be facing. But for now, this is a first step, and the fact that we can't change the language doesn't mean that we're precluded from doing that in the future.
Wonderful. So are there any additional comments from board members at this point before I open it up to questions from the public? Oh, I see Mr. Lazar has. Okay.
Thank you, through the chair. I wanted to just brief you. I did give you a last-minute supplemental. It's not any revolutionary changes to the ordinance, but I thought I would just walk you through it real quick, and the public hasn't had the benefit of seeing it, so I thought I would put it up on the smart board. Essentially, there was a change to the resolution. It's highlighted on the page 5, yeah, with the bold and italicized font. It's just, we learned recently through another recent LCP amendment that we needed to have some certain language, and to avoid having to go back and adopt another resolution, we have amended this one to reflect that specific coastal language. And that's just about the fact that we are amending our coastal plan the portion of the ordinance that applies in the coastal zone will compel an amendment to that coastal plan, or coastal program, I should say, and other procedural requirements. And then the remaining changes are on the following pages after the resolution. There's a clean copy of the resolution, and they're highlighted. What it is, essentially, Supervisor Fennell pointed out, we had an omission of text and the definition in the inland section for, or not the definition, but the language regarding the zones were permitted, and we've added that code, literally the word code, and then in the other section, we had duplicate text that was in there. So those are the only typographical changes, and that's because we don't want to get into any more involved things at this juncture. That's not to say that we can't bring something back in the immediate future. It doesn't compel any new procedural requirements, but it has to be confined to things that are within the scope of the MND. But for today, these are just some minor changes, and I would just add to the discussion with regard to the new versus existing and the ability to expand existing. Essentially, what you're hearing is that we believe that it was always our intention. The language may not reflect it, but the director has the latitude to say that this is the way it's supposed to be read. We can bring back more better language, and I think we'll want to do that for other sections of the ordinance that are confusing. We're going to hear the feedback in the coming weeks, and to that effect, we expect other alterations that are not substantive, but will help the public better understand the actual ordinance and interpreting it and understanding it.
Thank you.
That's it.
So I will ask our county counsel to introduce the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance amending Title III of the Humboldt County Code relating to commercial cultivation, processing, manufacturing, and distribution of cannabis for medical use, starting with Section 1, Section 313-55.4, and continuing thereafter.
Thank you. So I'm going to open the public hearing for this, and this is on the public hearing is on the substitute mitigation measures for the mitigated neg deck. And could I just see a quick show of hands if there are folks who want to speak on this? Again, the intent is to conclude this item within 20 minutes. Okay, I see 2 speakers. I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes each.
Ken Sawatsky, let's start with this. Basically, your baseline is right in front of me here. It was adopted 12/10/84. That's called your Humboldt County General Plan. The ordinance you're passing at this time is not consistent with this. I guess when it becomes recreational purposes, adopted here in 1985 was a general plan recreation plan. So maybe when we have recreational marijuana here, this will be applicable. That being said, I can't see any way that you're moving forward under the guidelines you are. You've clearly violated what you're doing with your negative deck here. I do want you to be aware of something. I want you to know what you're biting off here. If you pass this ordinance and you talk to anybody in planning, I talk to your staff, then you're going to be required to do your EIR prior to moving forward with your general plan update. This is a multi-million-dollar, $2, $3, $5 million EIR. Check with your staff. That's something that will be required. You have an open EIR. You're inconsistent in many ways. Here, in one of the ways you're inconsistent with, well, let's go with AE. You're saying that it's a viable unit for AE is, what, 40 acres? And yet you're permitting and you're asserting that a viable AE amount of space is 0.46 acres, I believe is what you're going forward with, 2,500 foot of canopy. This is totally inconsistent with the plan you have here. I just wanted you to be aware of that, and of course there are a whole long list of other things here that you're going to have to do and you should do. Lastly, I wish to state something. I have no problem with this business. I believe in assisted suicide, and if people want to do that, there's no problem with them going ahead and doing it, however they feel appropriate. I just don't want to see it in our neighborhood here, and I've made that quite clear. There's all kinds of people in the business model that doesn't work. I'm a businessman. My people in the business land, I mean, it's going to take all kinds of major expenses and tools to make this forward, so I only had 2 minutes, but I wish to put that on the record. The business model doesn't work.
Thank you.
Would show it's not feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Welcome.
Robert Sutherland, Humap. The CEQA guidelines specify that baseline is what exists at the outset of environmental analysis. However, the conditions you chose as baseline are temporary in nature and therefore cannot be used as baseline. The county is well aware of the exponential growth of the pirate industry in just a few years, from 4,000 outdoor grows to over 11,000 projected by Supervisor Bohm. This conspicuous boom is driven by price escalations due to market changes, and the promise of riches will quickly fade. To assume, as your program does, that you are mitigating from that as a baseline is a kind of four-flushing, a claim that authorizes, in fact, significant and ongoing environmental damage negligently ignored by the county. This was never the baseline condition and cannot form the basis of reasoned mitigations. The baseline analysis also does not account for your plan to allow growers to expand automatically up to the maximum size of their permit. Such expansion means more trees cut, more spotted owls displaced, more grow lights consuming energy. There are significant limitations to your analysis that in your rush you have missed. For example, with the RRR program, you plan to entice grows to on bad sites to move to good ones. But you have incorporated no guarantees that a pirate buddy of the grower cannot simply move in and grow in the old site. You fail to observe CEQA's rule of reason if you do not account for the fact that because this has been an outlawed industry, most of its participants have also exercised unbridled disregard for other laws. For decades, it has been obvious that you have pervasively failed to enforce, and you have no effective plan to change that. Thus, your plan will greatly increase
Thank you.
adverse.
Thank you.
The rest of my comments you'll get. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Supervisors, County staff. Kristen Nevedal, Director of Patient Focused Certification. I apologize for not having submitted written comments. The timeline's been a little quick, but I really want you all to know that we greatly appreciate the energy that's gone into this process thus far. A couple points of clarification. We do have concerns about the differences between existing cultivation sites and what's allowed for new cultivation sites, specifically the language that doesn't allow existing cultivation sites to have any expansion. We would respectfully request that that be stricken. The 5,000 square foot municipal or ministerial permit makes a lot of sense. However, between 5,001 and 10,000 square feet, you have a special use permit in place for such existing cultivators, and 10,001 to 20, you have a conditional use permit. And since these applications are going to be reviewed and scrutinized, we fail to see the reason why there could not also be expansion when appropriate on those parcels. And although not all of these parcels are going to meet the agricultural soil guidelines presented in the new parcels, many of them will meet the grade slope guidelines, the water catchment or forbearance issues outlined. So, and also there are a lot of cultivators who are not going to use the native soils anyways. So if they can meet these other requirements and be in pots or beds and or develop healthy living soils in the ground, it seems to make sense that they should be able to also have the same ability as new cultivators. Additionally, I have just 20 seconds. I ask the board to please consider creating some sort of a commission or committee to review this ordinance as it goes through implementation so that additions and corrections can be made if necessary. We do have concerns over whether or not the processing at a centralized location will be legal due to questions about transportation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address us on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. I thank you all for your incredible restraint. I'll just note to that last comment that I believe our director addressed the ability for him to use his existing discretion to make a modification to the language to address that point. So with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Supervisor Fennell.
I move approval of staff recommendations 1 through 6.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lazar, you don't get a vote.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to point out that I'd ask that you consider the corrections and the revised resolution that we presented to you with your motion.
Well, that's part of the recommendation, correct?
In the supplemental, but not the board report that you received.
Okay, so including the supplemental.
The recommendations is in the supplemental, and that's acceptable to the seconder?
Yes.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. All in support? Supervisor Bone?
Well, I was thinking about talking for 10 minutes and making them all come back, but
Don't worry, I've got something to say too.
We can talk later.
We'll give you your turn for sure.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in support?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone that helped make this happen. So with that, we do have this joint meeting with the Eureka City Council coming in. It's going to require us a little time to rearrange the dais here. So I'm going to ask if folks, we'll take a quick break until 2 o'clock. And if I could ask folks to please make room in the chamber for the folks that are here for the next item. Thank you all. When this has been done, and certainly not in recent memory, but this joint meeting of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors and the Eureka City Council. So we will reconvene our meeting now, but I will invite Mayor Yeager to open your City Council's meeting.
Okay, we'll call the special meeting of Eureka City Council to order, and Pam will do a roll call, please. Here.
Councilmember Brady? Here. Councilmember Atkins? Here. Councilmember Burgell? Here. Councilmember Cherubini? Here. Councilmember Arroyo?
Okay, and to start off the meeting here, I'd like to invite everybody to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. So I will go ahead and introduce our item, which is an update on the homeless strategy and implementation plan from Focus Strategies, the City of Eureka, and our Department of Health and Human Services. And would like to introduce our presenters here today. We have with us Rob Homeland, the Director of Development Services for the City of Eureka, Barbara Leahy, our Assistant Director of Health and Human Services, and Megan Kurtzeff-Schatz from Focus Strategies. And before I invite Mr. Homeland, Director Homeland, up to the podium, I'd like to give Supervisor Bass an opportunity, Vice Chair Bass an opportunity to make a couple comments.
And thank you, Chair Lovelace. You know, I think what I mostly want to say is thank everyone who helped put this together. I've never seen staff work so hard to make something happen, and both the county staff and the folks at the City of Eureka did an absolutely amazing job. And I think by all accounts, they'll tell you it wasn't easy, even as of this morning. This afternoon, everyone was rushing around, but I think we all realize that nothing worthwhile is really ever easy. So just wanted to let everyone know how much I appreciate it. I don't know if I can sit next to this guy this close this whole meeting, though. I'm about ready to slide off the edge. So while I know everyone here, is here to hear the presentation today, I hope you will take a minute to recognize that this really is a historic event, and I think Chair Lovelace did allude to that. But I can attest that going back and looking through the history, I have not been able to find a joint meeting of the City of Eureka and the Board of Supervisors. And I can say, having experience being across the street for 10 years with the City of Eureka, there was a real disconnect I felt for a long time. And I just want to say thank you to all those people who have worked really hard in the last several years to improve the relationship and improve communication. And I think what you're seeing here today is a perfect example. And I also want to thank Supervisor Jimmy Smith for starting the original city-county working group, because he had the belief back then that we could make it better. And I think I waited 15 years for something like this, and I just really thank you all for putting the efforts and commitment to this. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And before we go to our presentation, just one last comment, which is that while this is a joint meeting of our two bodies, we are two separate decision-making bodies as we sit here. And partly for that reason, this item is agendized here today to hear this presentation, to be able to hear from so many members of the public who clearly have great interest and involvement in this issue, and for us to be able to have a joint discussion around this. As agendized, the recommendation is that we would hear the presentation and then each schedule this for further discussion and possible action at our next regular meeting. So that is the expected outcome from this meeting, of course subject to the discussion that we have ahead of us. But just so that members of the public have some idea of what we plan to get through here today. And with that, I would welcome Director Holmland to the podium and to introduce your team.
Thank you, Chairman Lovelace, Mayor, Council, Board of Supervisors. It's an honor to be here before you at this historic moment of working together. We're here today to present to you the Homeless Strategy Implementation Plan, which has been long awaited by a lot of people in our community. And I want to start by expressing how grateful the city is for our ever-strengthening relationship with the Department of Health and Human Services. Without our own Department of Health and Human Services, we're reliant on that relationship for everything health and human services related. And it's really important for us to continue the strength of this relationship because we really need each other. We're here to discuss this plan. Was released to you last week, and a lot of people have been anxiously awaiting this. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize that some people are expecting this to be a magic solution. And that's what we all want, right? We all want a magic solution. We all want this to be easy. But the plan that's being presented to you today is going to be hard work. It's going to be a long path ahead of us. It's going to take a lot of effort between the city and the county working together. But we can do it together, and the plan outlines a series of strategies, to-do list items that we can implement one at a time in order to accomplish a joint goal. But when we say we, it's important to emphasize that we doesn't just include the city and the county. The plan strategically calls for us to work together to recruit people from the community to work with us. And so this plan is not just the city and county governments. This is a bigger, broader vision of working with the community. And so an important thing to emphasize also about this is that it may not be everyone's preferred plan. This may not be what we all want exactly, but it's going to be something that I think we all need to put our effort into jointly. There may be people in the community that don't like this approach or want a different approach, and a lot of people in the community I've seen squabble about this issue back and forth. But if we can all put our effort into this plan, and Megan's going to explain the values of the Housing First approach of why it's so important to work together on this. So a brief note about how we got to this point, about how this plan came about. In 2014, September, the city contracted the firm Focus Strategies to develop a homeless policy paper associated with our general plan update. And in that plan, in that paper, in the production of that, Focus Strategies brought the city and the county together and really helped the city understand that we need the Department of Health and Human Services to help us understand homelessness and how we can approach it in our general plan update. And so that partnership was really strengthened through this policy document here. And Director Leahy, or Deputy Director Leahy, will outline in a moment a lot of the accomplishments that came out of the this policy plan here. And one of the most important, I think, results of that was in that relationship, we agreed that we needed an implementation plan. We needed a to-do list of where to go from here. Though the policy plan outlined a lot of things that we could do and we started implementing those right away, we realized that we needed a little bit more instruction from Focus Strategies on how to actually make Housing First a reality in Eureka. And so that's how this plan came about. We've been working on it for about a year now. And I think with that, I'll pass it off to Deputy Director Leahy.
Thank you. And while Director Leahy is coming up, if I could just ask, we like to have our door open while we're having public meetings. Chief Mills, would you be willing to open the door for us?
Thank you. We're not going to be able to hear. Oh, Stephanie's trying.
And I just wanted to make one other note for this presentation that we're going to receive here. It's my intent as chair to allow our presenters to go through the entirety of their presentation before opening it up to questions. See if that's agreeable to everybody. Great. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. And again, like Rob said, this is a great opportunity. We put a lot of work into the plan and working in partnership. And to see all of you up there that I've been in numerous meetings with over the last couple of years, it's just great to all be together and to talk about some concrete strategies. So personally, this is a great opportunity and partnership for us to be working together. I did want to highlight, although we've been working on putting the implementation plan together, that didn't stop us from doing work along the way. And many of you have been involved in these accomplishments, and I didn't list them all, and I would be here all afternoon if I talked about all the great work that people have really contributed. So we have regular city and county leadership meetings. That wasn't something we had before. That's once a month. Many of you participate in those, and that's been a really important step to keep up the communication and to talk about how projects are going and new ideas to come. Along with that, we have the CHIP meeting that also happens once a month, and that's an opportunity for us to meet with an additional people in the community. So we have Eureka Main Street and Chamber of Commerce and other businesses and service providers, and that's been a great opportunity, again, for us to communicate with each other, what we're working on, and identify key areas. We submitted the HHHC, the Humboldt Housing and Homeless Coalition, submitted an application this year for $854,000, and many of the people in the audience have participated in that. We really appreciate that. I have the MAC and Arcata Bay Crossing, which was the wonderful project in Arcata we did this year. So I wanted to just focus a little bit on the really partnership programs, which is the MIST and the MAP that we've done in the last year. And you can see in terms of the MIST team, they've made 1,200 total contacts out in the community. And they've been able to house 23 clients. And we've seen a decrease in hospitalizations at Semper Virens and also arrests. With the Multiple Assistance Center, the MAC, we've had 108 admissions since September. 38 have been housed. We have some folks that gained employment. And we've been using a vulnerability index to make sure that we're serving the most vulnerable. So we've learned a lot in these two projects. There's some common themes that are coming up that we want to look at in terms of, no surprise to any of you, substance abuse, affordable housing, services that follow up with these individuals. So we have a lot of lessons learned, and I look forward to going into the next year and incorporating those and getting better and better at what we do. But I want to acknowledge that the staff has been great and really have done some great work. And, this is the first time really that Health and Human Services have worked that closely with law enforcement, so I just want to say that. We have been good with some of our community partners and stuff and agencies, but to really work that closely with law enforcement is a big deal, and we're very proud about that. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to invite Megan up to share the plan.
Welcome.